Ladies, pack your hoe bag.
Who you calling a hoe?
Pour up a drink and start.
That's a little kinky.
Karen.
Streaming 24/7 across all platforms.
24/7.
Yes, sir.
Live on sayitloud.com. Lock it in.
Y'all keep it locked right here.
It is another episode of Say It Loud with your favorite gilf and homie, Karen L. And today in my hot seat is Miss Latoya Dwight of the Fibroid Pandemic. Hi, Latoya. How are you?
How you doing, Karen? I'm doing fantabulous. Thank you so much for asking. How about yourself?
I'm well. I'm better than well. I'm good.
Good for you. I love to hear that.
I love your voice. It's so soothing. You should read those meditation things for people to go to sleep at night.
You know what's interesting? You are not the first person who said that. I've actually heard that so many times. I think my voice sounds a little bit annoying, but thank you.
Yeah, no, you should really do that. We need it. It's just very calming and soothing. So
I appreciate
yeah. So I invited Latoya on the show to talk to us about the fibroid pandemic and the work that she is doing to bring awareness about fibroids and what people are living with who are faced with having fibroids. Me being one of those people, I thought it was really important. We talk on the show about a lot about sex and sexuality and wellness. And I think this is a big topic, especially in the Black and Brown community, where we need to be educated. And so that's why Latoya is here to kind of give us everything we need to know and then some.
Let's do it.
All right.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the fibroid pandemic.
So before I get started, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. You know, I know that you've had several guests on your show before, and I know that there can be anyone sitting at this seat at this time slot this very day, and I don't take it lightly. So thank you so much for having me here. My name is Latoya Dwight. I am the founder of the Fibroid Pandemic. And in a nutshell, in all honesty, the Fibroid Pandemic was really created to provide resources to Black and Brown women, Black and Brown individuals, actually, who are looking to heal from uterine fibroids, whether it's a non-invasive approach, minimally invasive, or major procedure. At the end of the day, you know, a lot of people are faced with having little to no options. And in all actuality, that may not be their reality. That may not be their truth. That may not be their only option. And so, you know, based on my own personal experience, you know, is honestly what really drove me to really create the Fibroid Pandemic. And in all honesty, Karen, you know, I almost named my company the Fibroid Epidemic. And full transparency, I Googled that shit. I was like, okay, what's the difference between a pandemic and epidemic? Right. And as I continued to do my research on uterine fibroids as a whole, I realized that the name is so very fitting because it truly is a pandemic. It's a global issue. It impacts approximately 80% of people with a uterus. And I have to say people with the uterus because I used to say women until I got attacked. But then, you know, I'm open, you know, I'm always open to learning. And it is very true. It's very fitting to people with the uterus. About 80% of them will develop uterine fibroids at some point in their life. And about 80% of that segment are Black women,
Yes.
You know, and because of that, you know, this is actually taking on a whole storm against our culture. And this is something that should be in the news more often. You know, we hear about the term Susan G. Komen. If I say the term Susan G. Komen, you're automatically going to think of, you know, breast cancer awareness and the breast cancer walk. Well, why aren't people out doing walks about fibroids? It impacts so many people across the globe that this should be one of the main items that should be at the top of anyone's docket, anyone's conversation, any type of regulatory, suggestions or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this is truly a pandemic, and the fibroid pandemic is, you know, here to really help people find some type of healing within their lifetime.
I love that. I love that because I feel like most of the time we get our education from our doctors, right? Or a pamphlet, maybe, to kind of explain it. You don't have someone, and I said this earlier before we started recording, someone that looks like you, someone that's been in that situation, having those conversations and telling you what your options are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's scary for me as someone who is a mom, has a uterus, has children who are girls who have a uterus, and you're like, well, where are we pulling our resources from? Where are we looking for options? Are we just going to whatever our doctors tell us, or are we looking out there and seeing what's best for us when we talk about fibroids and how they affect each of us individually?
Right. It's very true. And it's very unfortunate because, to your point, a lot of people are not getting any information from their doctor. Me, perfect example, I was going to my OBGYN for about 12 and a half years. I thought we had a very great relationship until it happened to me, it being the uterine fibroid diagnosis. At the time, my boyfriend and I, he and I decided that we were a little bit too old, too mature to have an unplanned pregnancy. So we both agreed that I would go on a Mirena IUD. After a certain number of years, the IUD has to be replaced. So I went to go get the IUD replaced and they could not locate it. So they sent me over to ultrasound. And not only was the ultrasound tech able to locate the actual IUD, first she did a topical and she couldn't find it. So then she went vaginal. And not only was she able to locate the IUD, but she also saw fibroids. So her, with quote unquote good bedside manner, she said to me, "Oh, there's the IUD. By the way, how are your fibroids coming along?" And my response was, "What's that?"
Right.
And she was like mortified. She was completely mortified. And her reaction kind of startled me. And I was like, okay, wait, hold on. What's going on? So she's like, no big deal. I should go back and talk to the doctor. For the sake of the conversation, we'll call her Dr. Smith. So I go back into Dr. Smith's office. Now, remember, this is all within the same exact doctor office, all within the same exact doctor visit. So We're talking about an hour and a half, right? Get back in there and the doctor's like, yeah, so the tech saw some fibroids on your ultrasound. We recommend a hysterectomy.
What?
All within the same exact doctor visit. Now, by profession, I'm an employee benefits consultant. So, Karen, I'm on the front line negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts with insurance carriers on behalf of employers. So companies that have anywhere between 500 to 5,000 employees, I'm on that front line managing these multi-million-dollar contracts. For one, very stressful as hell because there aren't many people who look like me on the front line.
Right.
Okay. Number two, I see these doctor and hospital bills. So I knew immediately that hysterectomy is a major surgery.
Right.
So I go, well, wait, hold up, time out. Time out.
Yeah.
So I start probing her for all these questions. And in all honesty, she couldn't really give me anything. So I was like, well, what are they? How did I get them? Are they sexually transmitted? Is it hereditary? Can you just take the IUD out and they'll just go away? Like, what's going on with my body? And I felt like my body was betraying me. And very cavalier. She's like, well, they're just like kudzu. You cut them away and they'll just grow back. So this doctor who I had been going to for 12 and a half years, right, compared my womb, the place where all humankind actually develops. Mm-hmm. She compared my womb to kudzu, freaking weeds that grow outside. She compared my womb to kudzu.
How about she just said she'd take it away that fast without?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was the first.
We'll just take it out. Mm-hmm. You don't need it. What? Wait, what?
Exactly. And so she didn't really give me much to go on. So I left confused, frustrated, scared, got home to my boyfriend, and I didn't really have much to give him. So that added another layer of frustration and another layer of emotions that I didn't even really know, or I wasn't really even really ready to deal with. Right. Because now he's looking at me sideways, like, what the hell you got? Yeah. And that honestly started my my journey, my fibroid healing journey.
Wow. That's an amazing story that you're able to come through on the other end and support other women. But it's also devastating to know that you walk in a doctor's office, and this is such a critical part of being a woman and being able to have children, if that's a decision that you want or don't want. I think people can decide to have kids or not decide to have kids, but knowing that it's taken away from you is a very, very tough thing to live with. Like maybe I didn't want it, but I didn't want you to tell me I couldn't have it. And maybe I did want it and you just took that away from me. But yes, my experience was much like that. I don't even remember what it was like when I found out I had fibroids. The last time I had a discussion, I was pregnant, and in my ultrasound, they told me that I had a fibroid and that it was squeezing on my baby's face. And that as my baby continued to grow, it was going to continue to grow. But there was never any guidance. And after Jace was born, it was the same thing you said. The doctor nicely was like, well, if you're not going to have any more kids, you can take your baby carriage out, to be exact. And I was like, wait a minute. I didn't say I want to have any more kids, but I didn't say I wanted to take anything out.
Right.
You know? And I think doctors become desensitized. This is totally like off a subject, and I usually don't share so much of my personal life, but I feel like I could share with you. A year ago, I had a lump in my breast, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone. Nobody. I think one person in my life knew. Nobody else knew. And I just kind of like put it off and put it off and put it off. And I go to my OBGYN, and she obviously is doing my exam. And I'm like, well, I should probably tell her. And she sends me for an ultrasound. And like you said, the first mammogram, they're like, you can't leave. And I'm like, oh shit. They're like, you gotta stay and do an ultrasound. Like you can't do just a mammogram. You got to do an ultrasound. I'm like, oh shit. And then they leave me in that room, and I'm just sitting there in the dark. Like, I know this isn't good because most people don't get this far, right? You stop Absolutely. At the mammogram. You don't stay afterwards and have to like do an ultrasound. And then they were like both breasts. And she just walked in and she was like, your breasts are chock full of cysts. That was exactly what she said to me. And I was like, all right, well, what does that mean? Like, what are we going to do? Why is this lump here? And she was just like, if I drain them, they're just going to come back. And I was like, okay, so I've been thinking I got breast cancer all this time. Y'all not going to say nothing. Y'all not going to do anything. And that was the end of the conversation.
It's very unfortunate because a lot of people have similar situations, you know, meaning that the conversation is very limited with their doctor. You know, now I understand that doctors don't know everything, but at the same token, we do depend upon you to help educate us to the best of your ability. And just telling people that your breasts are filled with chock full of cysts, or, hey, just get a hysterectomy, it's like kudzu. That is completely unacceptable. It should, quite frankly, in my opinion, I think it should be freaking illegal.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with people's lives here, right? And, you know, we're going into this with our whole life depending upon this one person to help guide us, you know, in so many words. And it's unfortunate because, I mean, if you can only imagine how many people I talk to time after time after time again with very similar experiences, it can't be all in our minds. We can't all possibly be making this up, you know, and with me, while I don't know what it feels like, quote unquote, to be in need of a hysterectomy, I knew immediately that I didn't feel sick enough to go under the knife to have a serious surgery like that. And if you can only imagine how frightening it was to be charged with the fact that now I have to take my womb into my own hands. I started to read medical journals. Some I could understand, some I could not, but you better believe I had my head in those darn medical journals reading them. Scholar articles. I did various different types of coaching programs. I went vegan. I did vegetarian. I actually did it opposite. I went cold turkey vegan. Then it didn't work quite as well. So I went vegetarian. I was vegan for almost a year. Then I went vegetarian. I did yoga. I did qigong. You name it, I probably tried it. You know, I did teas and topical ointments, salves, all types of stuff. You know, I did Reiki, you know, and I did sound healing, a little bit of that, not much. Then I eventually did settle on uterine fibroid embolization, UFE. And so that's basically where they cut off the blood supply to the artery that's feeding the fibroid. And it's not for everybody, but it worked for me. And I would do it again if I had to.
Yeah, I've had people that I know that have done that and have been successful with it. I haven't done it because, like you said, I haven't been in enough pain or it felt uncomfortable to the point where I feel like I want to go under the knife.
Right.
But I do have very heavy periods. When they tell you you could wear a pad for 3 or 4 hours, I'm like, no, 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 I can't. And I've just learned to listen to my body. I have gone, I'm not vegan. I do not eat meat anymore, however. And I've made changes like that. I also know that a lot of the growth of your fibroids have to do with your hormones. And so part of that for me is I have a lot of estrogen, like a lot. Like, don't look at me, I'll get pregnant amount of estrogen in my body. And some women are not as fortunate. They have less, but I have an overproduction of estrogen, which makes me, voila, very feminine and very like, wait, you look great in your boobs, but it causes fibroids, it causes cysts, it causes very heavy periods and things of that nature. And you just have to learn how to balance that and take care of yourself and like know your body.
Right. And it's so, I love the fact that you mentioned that, because knowing your body is step one. Really understanding who you are, really understanding whose you are, understanding what your goal is, what's your end goal, what's your end game, right? And you're right. I mean, a dominance of estrogen is one of the main culprits of uterine fibroids, along with several other things. What people don't realize is that estrogen is in so much of the food that we eat. It's ridiculous. That should be illegal. I
Right.
always talk about what should be illegal, but I mean, dairy products for number one, I mean, even when your doctor prescribes your birth control pills, and it may be a low dose estrogen, but it's still feeding your body extra estrogen that it did not have previous to that.
Right.
And even if your estrogen, your progesterone levels are very similar, almost even, estrogen should never be as high as your progesterone. So that's still considered to be a dominance of estrogen. And people don't realize, like, I mean, estrogen dominance is very debilitating. It's very, it's actually, it can potentially become life threatening, you know? And what's frustrating to me, I heard you say that you have very heavy menstrual cycles. Number one, I try to tell people, if your menstrual cycle lasts longer than 7 days, that's not normal. It's
Right.
common, extremely common, but it is not normal. Oftentimes, these doctors will put patients on birth control pills to help control their period, when all they're really doing is really prolonging the situations and or possibly making it even worse.
Right.
So with that being said, when your doctor puts you on birth control pills, yeah, your menstrual cycle may not be as bad, but because it's feeding you all this extra estrogen,
Right.
now behind the scenes, these cysts and these fibroids are growing. And it gets to a point, like you said, when you're pregnant, your doctor tells you that, hey, the fibroids growing along with your child. Like, okay, so I come to you every single year. I've been going to my OBGYN for 12 and a half years. You never thought to mention that there were fibroids on my uterus? Like, how
Or
did I
how
go
about
from getting annual checkups, annual, pelvic exams, to a hysterectomy? Like, that just
right.
does not add up. And I definitely do believe that doctors need to be held accountable, held accountable for educating, at least notifying, giving options, and don't stop at what you only specialize in. Be real with your client, be real and open and forthcoming with your patient. Explain to them that there's what's called watchful waiting. You don't have to do anything about the fibroids. You don't have to. In your situation, you don't have to do anything.
Right.
If they're not getting worse, and if you are able to cope with them, you don't have to do anything. They are considered non-cancerous tumors, probably a small percentage, single digits, maybe 3%, 3 to 5% of fibroids do develop into becoming cancerous. So the odds are very, are not stacked against you, which is a good thing. But then there's also minimally invasive procedures. There's UFE, there's Acessa, there's so many other things, and then you get into the more invasive procedures, and, even the holistic, you can do holistic, where you are changing your diet. You're
Right.
incorporating Reiki, Qigong, yoga, exercise, and you're really, by what I would say, combining all of those items, it can really help reduce a lot of the fibroid bulk symptoms tremendously. I know that personally, and then the major surgery should be something that should be kind of considered towards the latter part of the process, right? Now, don't get me wrong, Karen. Everyone's situation is different. Some people, I know some women right now today who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who wear a Depends because their menstrual cycles are so very bad. I know women right now in their 20s, 30s, and 50s who do not leave the house during the first 2 to 3 days of their menstrual because their menstrual cycle is so very bad.
Yeah.
I know women who don't even bother buying sanitary products. They just do free bleeding because their menstruals are so very bad. That should be an alarm to these doctors. That should be
Right.
an alarm to the community. There's something going on, you know? And so with that being said, you know, things like if you want to go to the major route, you know, because I know some people who say, you know, my hysterectomy changed my life. I'm so happy I did it. And that's great. But the
Right.
issue I have is when it's the first and only option that you're
Right.
given.
Same. Like I said, it was, oh, well, if you don't need it, take it out. And I'm just like, but I didn't say that. I didn't want to take, like, I don't know how we go from 0 to 100.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and something you said really stuck with me. And it was just that doctors tend to specialize in, I'm an OBGYN, I'm a, podiatrist, I'm a this, I'm a that, instead of looking at a patient maybe holistically
Mm-hmm.
and saying, okay, well, what are these other things that might be affecting this? And how could we change these things first?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think it's kind of like you said, we just focus on here and these are the 3 things I can do for you. And that's that, instead of saying, all right, well, let me look at you as a being.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Let me look at what you're consuming. Let me look at your body type. Let's look at your genetics. Let's figure it out that way and look at you holistically as a human and as a complete person versus I'm going to just isolate this part of your body. And I'm going to tell you, these are the 1 and 2 things I can do. You can leave it like this. You can take it out. You know, I just feel like it's unfair to kind of treat someone in other parts of our lives. We're like, let's look at people holistically as educators, as, when you're looking at a full case and things like that. And then when we come to our medical, we're not doing that. And I just don't understand that. I'm not less of a person in a particular office.
You're so true. I mean, that is so spot on because what happens is they treat it like it's a one size fits all and it's not. It's actually one size doesn't even fit most,
Right.
And with that, with knowing that, you have to approach it delicately, patiently, and differently with every individual. There are some people who can get a laparoscopic myomectomy. I was not a candidate because the size of the fibroids. My 2 smallest ones were 5 centimeters and 7 centimeters. I'm sorry, 11 centimeters and 7 centimeters. So 11 is about the size of a grapefruit.
Right.
And I'm sorry, excuse me. 7 is about the size of a grapefruit. 11 is about the size of a small watermelon. So no wonder why people were asking me was I pregnant, And so that messes with your psyche as well.
It does.
It messes with your psyche. And when you get to the point to where you are you're packing clothes and sneaking extra pair of clothes in your gym bag just in case. I'm putting extra pair of clothes in my work bag. You know how many times I hid that from my now husband because I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't understand what was going on. It was something that became natural for me. And at some point I was like, wait, this is not natural. There are so many people who are doing that. But on top of that, they're suffering from what's called period poverty. And that should be a whole other, that's a whole other issue that
What
we
is
can take.
period poverty?
And so period poverty is basically lack thereof having clean sanitary napkins, sanitary products. So people typically think of period poverty as you're in a third world country with flies all around you. You're wrapped in a tarp or whatever, and your stomach is really, really bloated, and you don't have any type of food or anything like that, and no means to healthcare. That may be a part of it, but period poverty is for people like me as a single parent. When I had my son at 19 years old, and I had to decide if I could afford extra sanitary products or pay for his school lunch.
Right.
Extra sanitary
And
products
you gotta
or
pay
pay
for
for
lunch.
gas in my car in order to
Right.
get to work to pay for my products
Right.
and to take care of our household. Extra sanitary products or simply something as simple as him doing extracurricular activities, other sanitary products like deodorant, toothpaste. Which one do I do? That is the epitome of period poverty. But not only that, taking it a step further is, a lot of these products that are on the shelves that we see, I actually call them unsanitary products. The different name brands, Always and the Kotex, and I can go on and on and on. And I'm not bashing these companies, but what happens is a lot of these products are actually, they come from recycled products. Recycle plastics and recycled chemicals. And, there are even some chemicals that are in these unsanitary products that are outlawed in other countries. Why are they allowed here?
Right.
And when
Yeah.
you're using them at the base of your womb, or
Yes.
even up against your womb by way of a tampon,
Yes.
I mean, that's really unsettling. Because
Yeah,
what it's doing is literally feeding your uterus a slow death. That's what I always call it.
I actually read an article that someone wrote in college that tampons, I don't use tampons, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've stopped using tampons, and I don't use pads either. I just use a menstrual cup.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a couple years now. And that's a whole nother subject because a lot of people get on me about that. And they're like, I can't do it. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. You have to get comfortable with your body to be able to do that. But I read an article in college that a friend wrote about how the cotton in the tampons has bleach in it. And that bleach actually causes you to bleed longer,
bleed more,
and bleed more and thin that area of your cervix and vagina. And so my body never really liked them. I don't know why. My body always tried to push them out. And so they were very uncomfortable for me. So I never, and then because I have heavy periods, I'm like, well, I'm wearing a tampon and a pad. Like, what's the point? Because that's how heavy my periods were. Like, I'm going to put a super tampon in and then still have to wear a nighttime pad. Like when it was bad, it was bad.
Yeah.
And so I stopped. I stopped using them. I stopped using all of those products maybe about 3-4 years ago. No, 5 years ago. I stopped using them, and I will not look back.
Good for you. Good for you. But you're very spot on, Karen. You're right. I mean, a lot of the products are made with recycled, products, and like dioxin is one of the chemicals that is very prominent in a lot of these sanitary products. And if you just Google it and do research on it, it's actually outlawed in several different countries. Even some third world countries, it's actually outlawed. You think, yeah, exactly. And because what they do, they take these recycled products from, when you're recycling, it's coming from a dump. They have to recycle it, right? So just think of how precious our womb is.
Right.
And to your point, you're placing a tampon at the base of your womb, right into your cervix. And that's the canal that the baby comes through.
Right.
So it causes so many issues, so many womb wellness issues. And a lot of times you won't even realize it. And what happens, it's kind of like cigarettes. Your body becomes addicted to it. Like tobacco, the more you smoke, the more you want to smoke. The more you want to smoke, the more you smoke. The same exact thing with these sanitary products, to your point. They make you bleed heavier and longer. So the medical term is called menorrhagia. Menorrhagia is prolonged and or heavy menstrual cycles. So because of that, these products made with recycled chemicals, recycled products, your body becomes more dependent upon them. So what happens? Now your periods go from 5 days to 7 days to 9 days to 11 days to 45 days. And not only that, now you're using them. You go from using 3 a day to 5 a day to now changing it once every hour and a half. For me, when I first received the diagnosis of fibroids, I couldn't really relate to people who had very heavy menstrual cycles because it didn't exist for me. My menstruals last about 5 days. And I probably changed maybe 3 times a day. Well, I don't know what happened in my psyche, but about 6 months after the fibroid diagnosis, all hell broke loose.
Right.
My menstrual cycles were so bad. I would have accidents. And for me, it almost became crippling because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an employee benefits consultant. So I am standing at the front of the room doing open enrollment educational seminars and meetings. So, during renewal, when your employer goes through renewal, now everything's like virtual, but we were doing all that in person. I was traveling out of state to do these educational seminars. And when my menstrual cycle was on, I had to try to plan everything around my darn period.
Right.
That adds a whole other level of stress, right?
Right.
So with that being said, after everything broke loose, I remember the exact day. I remember exactly where I was. I had an accident at work. What my last accident, well, not the last, but when I was over it, the pivotal moment for me, I couldn't take it anymore. I remember calling my husband. I was in a car, hysterical, crying. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? I didn't have an answer. I was like, I don't know. I just can't take this anymore. So I remember calling because I had like 4 different consultations. I called one of the doctor's offices and I said, number one, I am not, and I cannot wait until you get this approved with my insurance. Number 2, I'm paying cash. Number 3, I need you to get me on your calendar ASAP, like this week. And they were like, well, Mrs. Zoe, we don't normally do that. And I don't care. I need in like right now. They placed me on hold for quite a long time. And came back. It's like, well, if we were to go outside of insurance, it'd be about $50,000. I was like, oh, I'm just joking. Never mind. No, just joking, girl. But that was a reality check for me. And that's when I decided to do something about it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that statistically, about people usually wait about 3 to 5 years before they start acting on it. I probably waited I started to act on it almost immediately, meaning when I started to do my research and started to do the coaching programs and all of that. But yeah, people wait 3 to 5 years and it usually is more likely just to get worse. So it's best to act sooner than later.
That's good to know, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's normal. Like it's such a common word that I hear. Mm-hmm. I know so many friends, and I think a lot of people might just sit on it a little longer because it doesn't feel in some cases like a sense of urgency, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not doing this right now, but you're probably also not paying attention to what it's doing to your life in the meantime. I want to ask you, because there's a lot of men that listen to this show. There's a lot of dads that listen to the show. There's a lot of people in relationships that listen to the show. And I do think to some extent, this does affect a relationship because your partner is going through something, right? They are battling just like any kind of medical crisis that someone will be battling. And in certain spaces, if someone says, this is what we need to do to your uterus, it also affects your relationship with each other and the decisions that you make together regarding your family. So how would like somebody deal with that? How does a man look at this and say, okay, how can I be supportive and how can I be there for my partner? Because I can only listen. I've never been through it. I don't know what it feels like. I don't know what that's like. That's a really good question. Number 1, I would say patience. Patience. Because think of it like chances are she may not understand what's going on with her body herself. So when she's telling you that her period's been on for 15 days, don't get irritated and think, oh, she's just lying. She's just not in the mood. No, she's probably telling the truth. When her period's been on for 45 days, like, well, how's that so? It's just on 2 weeks ago. Well, yeah, this is a reality that she's dealing with. So number 1, be very, very patient and ask questions. And, without the frustration, because understand she may not understand. So she may not have all the facts and all the information to answer the questions. But be supportive in a way to where you're there for her. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So I'm going to try to get emotional when I talk about this. So my doctor I was going to for 12 and a half years, I decided I wanted to get the IUD taken out. I wanted it out because in my mind, Karen, this IUD was feeding a slow death to my uterus and I need to take it out ASAP. And in my mind, Karen, having the IUD removed was going to make all my fibroid issues go away. Was I sadly mistaken? So my doctor, I scheduled an appointment. I went there to have the IUD removed. And I hear, whoa. So women were on the table, bottoms naked, legs open up in the stirrups. When you hear the word, uh-oh, you are almost immediately going to like sit up. Like, what's going on? Like, no. And I instantly felt my bottom getting warm. And I was like, then I started to get lightheaded. I'm laying on the table in the doctor's office, hemorrhaging.
I don't know if she punctured my cervix or what. She never said, but she couldn't get the IUD out. Can you imagine how much blood I was losing if I was lying flat on my back and I got lightheaded? I was losing a
I'm just there
ton.
listening to it.
I was losing a
I
ton
can
of blood.
imagine.
And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Just be still and don't move." So of course I'm getting lightheaded. Now I'm getting afraid. I'm becoming like really, really scared now. And so, they had the extra person there. And I said to the girl, because again, I was going there for a long time. So I kind of felt like I knew these people. And I said, I'm really afraid. She's like, "Just relax. Don't move." So she runs out. They come back with all this gauze and she pops a tampon into my woo-ha and told me to just relax for a little while. They brought a Coca-Cola. I don't even drink soda. They brought a Coca-Cola soda and told me just to wait. I didn't realize what was going on. My bottom was wet because I was hemorrhaging and they were afraid to let me leave because they didn't know, what the outcome was going to be. So that's why I had to wait. And actually I waited until the office closed. I was probably there about an hour and a half. And the bleeding stopped. And she said to me, she came back, she's like, "Okay, well, we got the bleeding to stop and this is what's going on. You're a really difficult one here today." And I
So
go,
she didn't take any responsibility that maybe she did something because you didn't come in there like that.
"I didn't come in there like that." And for me, if you can understand how frightening it was to lay there in a doctor's office, fully exposed, not having any answers, and to be told that you're a difficult one, for one, as a educated Black woman, we never want to be pegged as being difficult. And when you are challenged when asking questions, that adds a whole other element of frustration, anxiety, which then is like a domino effect because that extra stress adds to the development of uterine fibroids. So needless to say, I getting back to the point about what men can do to help support women, right? So I left the doctor's office and I never been back there actually. And one of my friends worked for the CDC here in Atlanta. And so she reached out one of her doctor friends and they referred me to another doctor in Midtown Atlanta. I went to go get the IUD removed. And so the night before I told my husband, I go, "Well, remember I'm going to that doctor." He's like, "Yeah, you mentioned it like 100 times." That was part of my anxiety. I didn't realize it, right? I didn't realize I kept telling him, "Hey, I got this doctor appointment," because they're going to try a second time to try to get the IUD removed. And that morning I drove down. I was really nervous and I got to the doctor's office. And right before they called me back, I looked up, my husband was walking in. I had no idea that he even knew where the doctor's office was. And when I tell you, that was such a level of comfort because I didn't realize how afraid I was. I knew I was nervous, but I didn't realize how afraid I was. And he's like, "You said about 100 times, I knew you were afraid." He's like, "Could you never talk about stuff like that?" And so that was his first time ever being in an OBGYN office actually watching. Luckily, he was kind of standing to my back, so he couldn't really see. But just having him there just was such a support level that I can't even put into words. So when you ask what can men do, be understanding, be patient is number one. Ask questions, but be there for her. Because as I mentioned, she probably does not understand what's going on with her body. So any unnecessary stress is just going to add more complications to the entire situation. But more so, pay attention to her body. I didn't realize how protruding my abdomen was. I just chopped it up to the fact that I was getting older. I had a son. Yeah, I work out quite often, but I had a son and I'm getting older and I work all the time. I'm just tired, and not realizing that lethargy was caused by the fibroid. So these are things that men can help pay attention to because as women, we put everyone first. We put our jobs first. We
Right.
put our friends first. We put our families first. We put our kids first. We put our household first. We come last. We use the last bit of that gas in the tank for ourselves. And usually that's when we're headed to bed,
Hmm.
exhausted,
Hmm.
So different things like extreme lethargy, when your face breaks out, your nails become very brittle. That can be a telltale sign of anemia. Anemia develops because of the uterine fibroid makes your menstrual cycle so bad. Women who are constantly in go mode, we may not pay attention to that. So those are
Right.
some things that men can do to help really, really support us. And you know, Google stuff. Start looking up stuff and just say, hey, babe, have you thought about this? Or even pay attention to your daughters. Really get away from giving your daughters those regular again, unsanitary products, because we have to get them when they're young, because this is when doctors start putting them on birth control. This is when they really start exposing themselves to all these different types of chemicals. So just really, number one, being patient. Number two, being understanding. Three, be there for her any way you can, and just help ask questions and help her understand what's going on, and try not to become frustrated and blame it on her.
Yeah, I
I know I
definitely
said a
think.
lot, but
No, no, it's good. I definitely think we need to have that conversation on how to make sure that it feels like you're being supportive and understanding, because
Mhm.
that person is just understanding, trying to understand what's happening to themselves, let
I
alone having to do that and think about somebody else.
Right. And I just want to mention I had several men, but this one in particular who would always stick out to me. He sent me a DM and he said that he wished he ran across my page sooner. Otherwise, he may not be divorced, because he didn't understand what was going on with his ex-wife's body.
Wow.
So yeah, and one time I was on an IG live session, Karen, and we're having a conversation like how you and I are having now. And a male put a comment, something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm happy I'm not a woman." And when I tell you, that was extremely frustrating. I said exactly what I said. You need to be there. You need to be supportive, because whether it's your daughter, your sister, your mother, your female cousin, your female best friend, your significant other, your auntie, a
Mhm.
colleague, any female who you love, at some point is going to impact you directly or indirectly. So this is information you want to know.
Right.
And he did actually apologize.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think like, "Oh, well, that doesn't happen to me, it doesn't matter," you
Exactly.
know, and it does matter, because especially if you love someone, they're suffering somehow. It doesn't matter what your relationship is with them. If they're dealing with something medically and they're suffering, then you need to be there for them
Be there
as
for
that you
them.
can, and
Be
by being
there for them.
supportive. Yeah, for
Absolutely. And
sure.
reassure her that it's okay, reassure her that you're there. Because in all honesty, at one point I just knew, like, oh, he's not gonna want to be with me anymore, because my menstrual cycles started lasting very long. And who wants to deal with that? I'm a
Right,
40 something year old woman. I'm having accidents. Like, who
right.
wants to deal with that? It's very embarrassing. And that's one of the main reasons why people don't talk about fibroids as much, because it usually ties back to a woman's menstrual cycle. And nobody wants to talk about heavy periods and pain and bloating and constipation.
And in a relationship, not feeling sexy, and I got, because that's a whole nother, like, when you're on your cycle, you're just like, look, I don't feel, it's not, it has nothing to do with you, sir. I don't feel sexy, right? I don't feel comfortable. My body's doing what it's not even listening to me right now. So, it's very hard to be intimate in a space like that.
Mhm.
Um, and so you need a partner that understands that, because that's a process in itself. And
Absolutely.
then also looking at your body and saying, okay, this is happening to me. I don't want this.
Mhm.
And having those conversations. So it's harder than what people think it is. And I think we need to give ourselves grace as women and understand that. And then when we're supporting someone else, we need to give them grace and allow them to kind of grow through whatever that process that they're growing through is.
Absolutely. Giving grace can, when I tell you, just allowing grace, extending grace, that can really be so comforting. It can be so fulfilling, more than what you'll probably ever know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we need to do that in all aspects of life personally, but that's
Absolutely.
just me. I think there's space for all of us to put our guard down a little bit and understand that the next person's human. Um,
Absolutely.
but that's only on my planet. I don't know about the rest of everybody else here. Thank you so much, Latoya Dwight, for coming and stopping by and talking to us about fibroid and the fibroid pandemic. Where can everybody find you if they want to do more research about you and your company and the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So, Karen, for one, it was definitely a pleasure. I can't believe time went by so fast. This is such
Yeah.
a authentic, natural, organic
Come
conversation.
back again. We'll do it again.
So the fibroidpandemic.com, you can find me online. You can also find me on Instagram at the Fibroid Pandemic, on Facebook at the Fibroid Pandemic, on YouTube at the Fibroid Pandemic. I need to actually get back on YouTube more often. And on Clubhouse at Fibroid Pandemic. Yeah, so that's where you can find me. You can send me a DM, send me an email, and I'll definitely get back to you.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure that I put all that information out so that you can get it. If you have any questions or want to do some research for yourself or somebody that you love, we'll make that information available to you. Thank you so much again. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure, Karen.